We want to give proper introductions tonight, and we're delighted that you're here. Dr. Bart Ehrman is the James A. Gray Distinguished Professor at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And he came to UNC in 1988 after 4 years of teaching at Rutgers University. At UNC, he has served as both the Director of the Graduate Studies and the Chair of the Department of Religious Studies. A graduate of Wheaton College, Professor Ehrman received both his Master's of Divinity and Ph.D. from Princeton Theological Seminary. And since then, he has published extensively in the fields of New Testament and early Christianity, having written or edited 23 books, numerous scholarly articles, and dozens of book reviews. Let's give Dr. Ehrman a warm Kansas City welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
To my left, Dr. Craig Evans, New Testament scholar, is the distinguished professor at the New Testament at Acadia Divinity College, Acadia University in Wolfville, Nova Scotia, Canada. He's a graduate of Claremont McKenna College. He received his Master's of Divinity from Western Baptist Seminary in Portland, his M.A. and Ph.D. in Biblical Studies from Claremont Graduate University in Southern California. He's a well-known evangelical scholar that has spoken and appeared throughout the world. He's been elected member of the prestigious SNTS, a society dedicated to New Testament studies. Author and editor of over 60 books, hundreds of articles and reviews. Professor Evans has given lectures at Cambridge, Oxford, Durham, Yale, other universities. Let's welcome Dr. Evans to Kansas City. My son Jeremy Johnston joins us tonight in asking the questions. I'll pose questions to Dr. Ehrman, and then Jeremy will to Dr. Evans. Jeremy's mentor is Dr. Craig Evans in pursuing a Ph.D. at the Oxford Center for Mission Studies in Oxford, England. His dissertation is on New Testament Gospels, and so you can imagine this young understudy is really excited to be in this debate tonight. So I think we ought to welcome you, young man, shall we? And we've got some wonderful other great leaders here. Dr. Phil Roberts, president of Midwestern Baptist Seminary. Dr. Radu Gagida, Greek scholar. And all of our wonderful friends from Scotland. Would you introduce him?
Dr. Paul Foster, would you please stand for all the way from University of Edinburgh. Traveled 28 hours to be here, so great to have you, Paul Foster.
And I want to introduce Dr. Evans' wife, Jenny, and their beautiful daughter, Carrie, from Nova Scotia. Would you all stand? Give them a big Midwest welcome. Our format tonight is 7 questions, critical questions. We'll have answers of at least, at the maximum, 5 minutes each. And after that, we'll have concluding remarks. I'm going to ask that unless it's an emergency, try to stay in your seat. We're going to be videotaping tonight, and that will help us. Let's get going. Number 1, Dr. Ehrman, are the Gospels reliable?
Well, I'd like to thank the pastors of First Family Church for inviting me, and for Craig for debating me, and all of you for coming out to hear this. I think since this is going to be the topic for the entire evening, I'd like to see what the lay of the land is. So I'd like to know how many of you would consider yourselves to be Bible-believing Christians. Right. Good. Okay. How many of you would think that the Gospels are completely reliable? Right. How many of you are here to see me get creamed? Right. Thank you. Thank you for your honesty. Well, I have a tall order with this crowd. When I started out in my studies to be a scholar of the Bible, I thought that the question of the reliability of the Gospels was one of the most important questions facing Christians. I, too, thought at that time that the Gospels were, in fact, completely reliable. But when I learned Greek, started reading these Gospels in the original language, started comparing them carefully with one another, grappled with the problems, prayed about the problems, did my level best to deal with the problems, I came to a different conclusion. And all I ask tonight is that you approach this debate with an open mind. I'll be very interested in hearing what Craig has to say about these topics, including this first one. Craig and I have known each other for over 20 years, but we've never debated before, and we've never had a discussion about this issue. I will be interested in knowing whether he thinks there are, in fact, any historical errors in any of the Gospels. And if not, I'll be interested in knowing how he explains that as a historian who knows full well that historical sources always have errors. But if he thinks there are errors, I'll want to know how he decides what an error is, and how we can know if there are a few errors, there aren't a lot of errors in the Gospels. And if there are a lot of errors, I'll wonder how he can say that the Gospels are reliable. But we'll obviously wait for his answer. Let me tell you my view on these questions. In my view, there is certainly historically reliable information in the Gospels, of course. But there are also pieces of historically unreliable information. This can be seen by the fact that sometimes there are flat-out discrepancies between the Gospels, as you will see yourself if you just read them carefully side by side. Let me give you just a taste out of 1,000 examples. The Gospel of Matthew says that the father of Joseph, Jesus' father, was Jacob. His grandfather was Mathan, and his great-grandfather was Eleazar. The Gospel of Luke says that Joseph's father was Heli. His grandfather was Mathat, and his great-grandfather was Levi. Well, which was it? The genealogies differ. One of the key motives of the Gospel of Mark is that Jesus' disciples don't recognize him as the Messiah until chapter 8. But in the Gospel of John, they call him the Messiah right away, the first time they meet him in chapter 1. Which is it? How could it be both? There are small discrepancies between the Gospels, hundreds of them. Was Jairus' daughter sick but still alive when Jairus came to ask Jesus to heal her, as in Mark? Or did she just die before Jairus came, so that he asked Jesus to raise her from the dead, as in Matthew? Hard to see how it could be both ways. The Gospel of John says explicitly that Jesus died on the day of preparation for Passover, the afternoon before the Passover meal was eaten. The Gospel of Mark says explicitly that Jesus died the morning after the Passover meal was eaten. Don't take my word for it. Read John 19 and Mark 15 for yourself. They contradict each other. Or look at the resurrection accounts in the four Gospels sometime and ask yourself, how many women went to the empty tomb? What were their names? Was the stone rolled away before the women arrived or after they got there? What did they see there? One man, two men, or two angels? What were they told to do? To tell the disciples to go to Galilee or not? Did they tell the disciples or not? Did the disciples go to Galilee or not? It depends which gospel you read. You get a different story every time. We should not say that these are a bunch of details and don't affect the larger picture. The larger picture is made up of nothing but details. The big pictures are vastly different too, as you'll see once you allow yourself to admit that the details are all different up and down the line. In my opinion now, the accounts of the Gospels cannot be reliable because they differ in hundreds of ways, both big and small, and they contain numerous historical errors.
Dr. Craig A. Evans, welcome. We welcome you tonight. I now give you the floor with question number 1. Are the Gospels reliable?
Yes, I believe they are. But what the Gospels are, and therefore in what sense they are reliable, is not always understood, either by Christians or by non-Christians. In a recent debate, Professor Bart Ehrman declared, "We must recognize that the Gospels are not what we wished they were." This is very true. It is true for Christian laity and it's true for scholars, but in different ways. Christian laity wished that the Gospels told us more about Jesus, ranging from Jesus' upbringing in youth to greater insights into his personal life.